WGBH TV Boston presents Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett, and it's spring bulb time. Last September and October, I planted some bulbs out in the garden in a trench, covered them over with leaves and plastic so that they wouldn't freeze, and now I've gone out and brought a couple of them in. You see here, for example, is a pot of tulips. This is a variety called Kaiser Krumm, an orange and red one, an early variety, will do very nicely. And then here we have a hyacinth. And a hyacinth, they're very nice to pot a single one in a pot because then you get, rather expensive, you get the most mileage from them, I think. Down here in the center of the bulb, you see the flower buds already started. Now, if I were to leave this plant just as it is, some of those buds would open when they were no more than 3 inches tall, and that's not what I want. I want to shoot them up in the air 4 or 5 inches before they open, and so I use what I call a dunce cap treatment. Simply invert a flower pot over the top like that so that they're in darkness, and then they'll shoot up in the air. Now, these bulbs have been outdoors waiting for spring. Now that we've brought them into these temperatures, they think that springtime has really arrived. Well, today's program, I'm going to show you how to read a seed catalog, and I'm going to give you a list. Actually, read from the list of the seeds in the vegetable line that I am ordering this year for my own garden. Also, I'm going to tell you how to get rid of mealybugs on houseplants without the use of poisons. And in our plant clinic, I have a grape ivy that I call a terminal case. But first of all, let's take a look at some of the progress going on in the greenhouse. And here, for example, I have an old chrysanthemum plant which has blossomed for at least a month, maybe 5 weeks now, and is beginning to look the worse for wear. But I'm not going to throw this plant away. As a matter of fact, this is what I'm going to do with it. Just take the plant right up to here and cut off those old blossoms and throw them away. And then let me show you what I want down at the base of the plant. Down at the base is where new shoots are already coming. You see this one coming right down here? This little plant will be one of the divisions for next year. And next spring, I'll be able to divide this up. There'll be a number of new ones come. Probably have a dozen plants or more from this one to plant in my garden next April or May. Now, the way to do is to set this on an out-of-the-way windowsill where it'll get bright light. Remember to water it occasionally, and it's going to sort of mark time until spring weather arrives. Well, that takes care of the old chrysanthemum. Now let's talk about something new. And in this instance, I want to talk about these alpine strawberries. The alpine strawberry is a variety which does not send out runners, but has small fruit like those of a wild strawberry. The plant grows 10 or 12 inches tall, bears white blossoms and red fruit from June until October, and is a great ornamental plant, and the fruit is edible as well. Well, these little seedlings have reached the point where they need to be transplanted into their own containers. And I'm going to use here one of these 6-pack plastics, so each plant will have its own little compartment. And the soil that I'm using is Jiffy Mix. This is a mixture of peat moss and vermiculite. You notice that I'm firming down each of these compartments so that the soil will be evenly firm in each one, and rather firm, not too soft, because I want these plants to stay in the position in which I place them. Now, I use a label, just a little wooden label now, and dig out 1 or 2 of these little fellas, ease them out of the ground. See that nice root system started there? Go right over to the flat and make a hole so that root can go as straight down as possible. And very gently firm the soil around it. I want that plant to be at the very same height in which it grew previously. Now let's take another one of these. Take the plant by the leaf. It won't hurt the leaf, but if you grabbed it around the stem, you might squeeze the very life out of it. So handle it like that and set it in. Now, I'll continue later on and fill in the rest of these. So these plants will grow in a good sunny window so they can make nice progress. By next May, they'll be 4 or 5 inches tall, ready to go right into the garden. Well, another thing, just a week ago, I had this situation come up about someone said, I'd like to have a Dracaena that would have character, and my plant grows straight up in the air. Well, I gave this one some character by laying it on its side, repotting it so that it started off at this angle. And if you'll notice, the tip has already started to grow up in the air. Within a week's time, it's showing what it would like to do. So we'll have a plant with this crooked stem. Then down here at the soil, close to the soil line, I cut out a little notch, and below that notch, 1 or 2 more new stems will come up and grow straight up. So we'll have a many-stemmed plant before we're through. Another thing we should talk about on progress, we talk about a gloxinia. And you've seen these, of course, in blossom. About 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I brought from home a gloxinia tuber, which had been resting for a period of 3 or 4 months, and the new growth was just beginning to show above the tip. Repotted it, and now I have 3 sturdy young stems coming out. This plant will be far more beautiful than this one when it blossoms. There's no reason in the world, if you will let a gloxinia go through its resting cycle and its growth cycle, that you can't keep it for 10 or 15 or 20 years and still grow. Well, another thing I want to do today is to talk about the Streptocarpus and another way of propagating them. Now, this plant is called the Cape Primrose because it comes from the Cape of Good Hope region. It is not a primrose, but it's given that name for what reason, I don't know. Now, these plants, as you see here, are rather crowded. They've been on the same pots for a couple of years, and there are several crowns on them. So what I shall do right now is to divide this blue one. Instead of having one plant, we'll have several before we're through. Okay, now, one nice way to do when you first drop it, when you first want to divide a plant, drop it gently on the bench that's where you're working, and that will cause some of the soil to break away from it. Now we're getting down to the critical point, and we'll have to probe around in there to see just where those crowns are. Now we can use a knife. All right, now there's one nice plant. You can see that one. And see what else we find back here. Some of these are rather crowded together. You have to, I don't know. Looks as if we might get a plant out of that. All right, another plant here and another plant there. Now we have 3 of them, and since at this stage they're young plants again, you might say, we'll pot them up in much smaller flower pots. Just a flower pot like that, and set them, remember, at the same depth at which they grew previously. Firm the soil around them so they'll stay put at where you want them to stay. Now this is one of the divisions. Now we know that this is going to be a blue one, just like the parent plant that we started with. So, one division, another division, and a third one. Well, now I'm going to go on to another method of propagation. You've seen me start these from seeds and from division. Now we'll start one from a leaf cutting. And I'm going to use a fairly old but a pretty strong looking leaf here. You can see this leaf it looks a little bit the worse for wear because it has some notches out of it. Take a knife and cut those side ribs right along by the midrib, on each side, just like that. It seems a strange way to do, but that will where those midribs or those side ribs are cut, and you can see where each of those has been cut. I will get a new plant identical to this blue one that I started with, and all you do is lay it on some damp sand and pin it down. In this case, I'm using some pieces of paper clips. So you want to get firm contact with the soil or with the sand, like that. And then we'll slip this into a plastic bag so it has its own little greenhouse. Put this in a place where it'll have bright light and warm temperatures, about 75 degrees. And within a matter of a month or so, little spontaneous plants will arise spontaneously along those cut surfaces. One more way to propagate a Streptocarpus. Well, another thing I should talk about today is how to control mealybugs without using an insecticide. Matter of fact, let me show you what these mealybugs look like. First of all, I have someone brought in this great big jade plant, which has not a big infestation of them, but a fairly good size infestation. And I'll find one of these for you here in a minute. There we see it. Right up at the base of that leaf, you see this white cottony mass. Now the mealybug is a tiny insect sucking the juices out of the plant, protected by this waxy cotton covering. It resists many poisons unless there has, specific poisons even, because it has a tendency to roll off that waxy surface. One way to take care of them is to use a cotton swab dipped in alcohol. Won't hurt the plant a bit. Just reach underneath those things and wipe him off like that. Now you see there's the mealybug, and he's gone. Now it'll take a long time to go over a plant like that, and so it's not the kind of a thing that you do every 10 minutes. But if you watch your jade plants and catch them before you get a big infestation, that's one good way to do it. Now I have another way to do it, again one which I like even best of all, and that is to use water. Now I have here just a smaller jade plant. Suppose this were the faucet at your kitchen sink. Just wash underneath that foliage, just like that. Try to get, that's where they congregate, at the joints of the stems. All right, now you might say that this big one is too big to put in your sink, but it is not too big to take into the shower. And I would lay a plant like that on its side, even though I broke off a few leaves now and then, and I would really wash as many away, first of all, as I possibly could. They go down the drain, and that's the last of them. I haven't used an insecticide on my houseplants for many, many years, and I don't think that you need to either. Well, now I come to one of the features today, and that is how to read a seed catalog. And I have brought in with me 3 seed catalogs of companies that I've done business with for many, many years. And I'll tell you which ones they are. And I should say they're 3 out of a couple of hundred of different kinds of seed catalogs that are available to you, many free of charge. Well, the first one is Burpee's. Now, Burpee is a company that's celebrating its 100th year in business. It has offices in Warminster, Pennsylvania for the East Coast, Clinton, Iowa for the Midwest, and Riverside, California for the West Coast. And then another great one that I've done business with and like is Harris Seeds. Harris does business throughout the country. Their headquarters are Rochester, New York. And then a third one is the Stokes Seed Company. Not only do they have an office in Buffalo, New York, but one in St. Catharines, Ontario. They do a lot of business in Canada as well as the United States. 3 of many very reputable companies. But if you were to look at a seed catalog, what would you look for? Well, the first thing that I like is a good index. I would like to be able to find the plant that I'm looking for immediately. And also, it's very helpful if the plants are listed alphabetically in the book itself. very helpful. Another thing I look for is cultural information. I think that the Stokes catalog is especially good in this regard. They tell you when to plant and how to plant. And this is good not only for a new gardener, but for an old one as well, to find out the latest ways of doing it. Also, when you're looking at catalogs, read the fine print. I am very wary of those catalogs that are so full of superlatives that I begin to wonder whether or not they really could be that good. A great thing to do is to consult more than one catalog so that you can have a little comparison. And remember one final thing: just because a variety is new does not mean it's necessarily better than a variety that has stood the test of time. Now, I'm going to give you a partial list today. I know we don't have time to go through it all, but a partial list of those vegetables that I am going to order this spring, and next week I'll come back and do some more of them. Well, let's start alphabetically with beans, snap beans. I have 3 varieties of green snap beans that I'm going to grow. One is tender crop, and another is executive, and the third is bush blue lake. Now, I grew the blue lake as a climbing plant last year. The fruit is very, very tender, and the seeds are small and very tasty. So I'm going to grow it as a bush type. I think it'll be a little bit easier to handle. I hope that you have a pencil down. Maybe you want to make a list of some of these varieties for your own garden. Now, among the yellow wax beans, the one that I really enjoy is Gold Crop. Gold Crop was an All-America winner in 1974, and it is really a great bean, wonderful production, freedom of disease, fast-growing, all the nice qualities. But Harris has a new one this year they call Sun Gold, and I'm going to try that just as a comparison. I'd invite you to try new varieties to compare them with the ones that you have grown previously. Some will do better in your garden, let's say if you live in Massachusetts, than if you had your garden in Missouri, and vice versa. So you pick the ones that really do for you. Now, among the unusual beans, I'm going to grow that purple-podded one again called Royalty. Nice one. And then if I grow any lima beans this year, it will be the pole lima called King of the Garden. Now, the King of the Garden was listed in Burpee's catalog in 1888, and it is still listed in this year as well, so it has to have stood the test of time, a mighty good recommendation. Among the beets, the early one I like is Ruby Queen. Fast-growing, delicious, and early, quick. Detroit Dark Red is the standard mid-season or main season one. Both of these are available from almost any seed company. Harris, again, has a new one they call Pacemaker 2. It's a hybrid that grows quickly and uniformly. I shall try some of those this year. And in last year's garden, we had a sort of a taste testing panel among the staff here at the studio, and they said that Burpee's Golden Beet was their favorite for flavor. That's Burpee's Golden. It's available not only from Burpee, but other companies as well. Alphabetically, we come to Brussels sprouts, and a great one that I'll use again is Jade Cross Hybrid. Among cabbages, look for this thing on the cabbages, the words yellows resistant or yellows tolerant. Yellows is a virus disease that attacks cabbage plants in, you might say, in midstream, and they wilt and fall over and die. If you get the varieties that are tolerant or resistant, then you have a much better chance of having a crop. Among the early green cabbages, I'm going to grow Stonehead again. That's an All-America winner. Very good. A main season green will be King Cole. And then I'm going to grow a new, to me at least, one from Harris, for my late one, called Harris Resistant Danish. For the red cabbage, a variety called Red Acre. This comes from Stokes, who happen to have a yellows resistant strain of Red Acre. All of them are not yellows resistant. And for that Savoy cabbage, that's the one with a crinkled foliage, I'm going to grow Savoy King. It's not yellows tolerant, nor are the other Savoys yellows tolerant, but this is a great one. Now remember, when you plant your cabbage seeds, allow 4 to 6 weeks in addition to the date or the number of days to maturity that printed in the catalog. Now, maybe I should explain that. The catalog says 60 days. Add another month or 6 weeks from the time that you would be setting them out in the garden to the time that you sow the seeds. Back up a month or 6 weeks and then sow the seeds. Otherwise, they won't get ripe for you for that much longer. And the Chinese cabbage, one I had last year didn't do too well. I'm getting a one called Springtime, and that's from Stokes. That ought to be a great one. In the carrot line, I have grown Scarlet Nance for years, and it's a great one. Harris has a new one. Again, I'm going to try this one called Pioneer, a hybrid carrot that grows very, very uniformly, a medium-length carrot, because we have rather heavy soil here, and the long ones won't do too well for us. Well, I didn't get very far through the list, but I will come back to this next week, and I hope that in the meantime that you'll get your catalogs together and pick out the varieties that you want to order. And one thing for sure, order your seeds as early in the season as you possibly can. Some of these varieties are going to be sold out quickly this year because a lot of people are going to have victory gardens. Well, in my plant clinic, I have a very unhappy looking grape ivy. And I happen to know some of the history of this plant. Someone told me that it was given from one person to another because it didn't look too well. The second owner trimmed it back a little bit and fed the plant. Well, the plant responded, but so this person kept on feeding it every couple of weeks. And then after several months, stopped feeding and the plant died. Well, I think it was coincidental that the plant went to pieces at that time. I think the real problem was that there was too much feeding. I would say feed a grape ivy once every 4 to 6 months, not every other week or so. I would throw this plant away. It's just absolutely not worth saving. Nothing could make it very happy. But let me show you what a nice one looks like right up over my head here. Here's a grape ivy. It's been in an office for 2 or 3 years. It's been pinched regularly, dark green, not fed too often and not watered too often. Allow the soil to get dry between waterings. Now we come to questions. And if you have questions on gardening, would you send them to Crockett's Victory Garden, WGBH, Boston 02134. And I have a question. The first one is from Frank and Louise McDonald, who say, we've cut a pineapple top and allowed it to dry for a week or so. Can't remember what comes next. Well, the next thing is to stick about 1 inch of the bottom of that pineapple shoot into either sand or a mixture of sand and peat moss. Keep it relatively dry, watered every 2 or 3 days, and before long it will make shoots and you'll have a nice little pineapple plant growing from it. Sue Jolie wants to know what causes white mold on the top of the soil of my houseplants. Well, if this is actually a wet mold, it could be that you're watering the plant too frequently, and watering is the primary way that I know to kill houseplants. It may be that you have a white incrustation of fertilizer salts, however. In that instance, scrape away as much as you can, water the plant regularly 3 or 4 times an hour apart, and wash some of that fertilizer away, or maybe even repot it in fresh soil. Bruce Cadanelli has a question about bird's nest ferns. The lower leaves of our bird's nest fern are always turning brown, shriveling up and dying. Yet it always has one or two new leaves growing up from the center of the plant, so appears healthy. What's wrong? But your plant needs more humidity. Ferns like humidity, and the bird's nest fern is no exception. Set it on a tray of pebbles with water underneath them, underneath the pebbles, so that the moisture evaporating will sort of give a little aura of humidity around your fern. Also, these kinds of plants do better if there are a number of them together rather than just one lone plant. All right, here's one, again, from Frank and Louise McDonald. Following your instructions, some rhubarb plants have been boxed, put in the soil, and allowed to freeze. What next? Well, the next thing is to allow them, or to bring them into your cellar. Anytime after the 1st of the year or the 1st of February is great. Bring them into your cellar. Perfect darkness is okay. You don't need light. And they will shoot up very, very rapidly. And when they get to a foot and a half or 2 feet tall, simply snap them off and eat them. They're just so tender, much more tender, of course, than the ones that you grow out of doors in the garden. Mrs. Willie Lee says this year many of our tomatoes fell off the vine before they were ripe. Others split open but remained on the vine. What causes this, and how can we prevent it? Well, it seems to me that your soil has been allowed to go from dry to wet and dry to wet. And this alternation of moisture content in the soil will cause these problems, as well as blossom end rot. So I would say mulch around your plants with hay or peat moss or leaves or grass clippings, something to keep the soil evenly moist, and I think you'll get away from a lot of your problems. Bob Daniels says, do you have any suggestions for growing larger onions? About a fourth of mine were the size of tennis balls, the rest were the size of large eggs. 2 things to do. Thin your onions so that they stand about 2 to 3 inches apart. That's one thing. And also, onions like moisture beneath the soil, and they like a muck soil, and most of us don't have that kind of soil, but that means one with a high content of organic matter. Also, feed the plants regularly. We will be sowing the seeds of onions, about 6 or 8 weeks before we transplant the young seedlings into the open garden. Also, getting an early start, that is, in the spring will help you to get larger sized onions. So ones that are started from seed, planted directly in the garden, that never really get to show what that particular variety can do for itself. Dear Mr. Crockett, followed your instructions on storing dahlia tubers, but found them in the cellar the other day with sprouts almost 2 feet long. That's from Leonard Latile. Well, I would say that your dahlias have been kept in a place that's too warm. That's what's making them sprout. And I'll tell you that dahlias are one of the most difficult tubers to bring through the winter. You really have to have a place where the temperature stays about 45 degrees. Now, what I had suggested was to put the dahlias in a box with some damp sand or peat moss and tip it against an outside cellar wall. Maybe you can find a place which is even cooler, and simply knock off what you have there in the way of sprouts, and you'll get new ones. Now, my tip for today has to do with disinfecting old flower pots so that they don't carry disease to your new seedlings. The easiest way I know is to use 1 part of household bleach to 9 parts of water. Let the pot soak about 10 minutes and then dry before using. Just one more tip from Crockett's Victory Garden. I hope you enjoy the program every week.